Hi, Tiny Trex here. Um, I wanted to do a video about some pros and cons of crested geckos. If you are a parent looking to get your teen uh, a crested gecko for some special reason as their first reptile, or if you're a teen looking to convince your parents. I have all my pros and cons right here. Don't worry, not this whole book is not pros and cons of them, but it is just this page. Do not worry. But let's get into it. I will not have either of my crested geckos out during this video because I did stress them out a little bit today because they each had to have soaks. Hi. This is Thor. He's part of my tiny zoo. But starting off with some pros of having a crested gecko. Yes, you can come into my lap. Um, First off, they have a powdered diet, which is really easy to manage. All you need to do is just scoop some into one of their bowls, uh, and then mix it with water. It's really easy. You change it out every single day. Uh, Not much to do there. And if you want, you can give them bugs, though they can thrive on just crested gecko diet, but it is completely optional to give them bugs. I give them I give them to my crested geckos because I don't mind handling bugs. I will grab I'll grab any bug and just give it to any of my animals if they need it. I personally feed mealworms very rarely because they are a very fatty treat for reptiles. And I give mainly crickets to my older girl, Stinky, because it gives her a nice way of enrichment, and it's just good for their hunting skills. Another pro is that they are super cute, uh, especially whenever it's dark and all you have on as a light is like your TV. Their pupils get real big and their eyes look kind of like these ones on my shirt. They're just too cute. They are adorable. They do so many funny things in their enclosures. I have so many pictures of Stinky whenever she was younger, doing so many funny things in her old temporary enclosure, and whenever I first set up her big enclosure. Um, but yeah, they are very interesting creatures. Love them to death. Another pro is that they are generally quiet, um, but if you get a male and it's breeding season, you might have to deal with some chirping. I will put a video uh, here of a male crested gecko chirping, uh, and male crested geckos, whenever it is breeding season and they're getting feisty, they will bite, but not in a way to hurt you. It's more of hey, I think you're a female, let's breed bite, because that's what they do in the wild. It's just breeding behavior. People in the crested gecko community, they call them love bites because he's just showing you that he really loves you, and he makes these funny little noises while he does it. But I will put a video of a male crested gecko chirping right now. Another pro is that they are quite manageable, as long as you do pay attention to them, be patient with them, and take your time. Hi. Uh, Kind of like a rescue dog situation. At first, uh, you will need to leave them alone besides feeding and watering them for 10 days to 2 weeks. because they will need to get used to you and just get used to all of their new surroundings. So it is not recommended that you handle them right away as you get them. Um, the only reason I would suggest handling on the first day is to take them out of whatever you bought them in and move them to their new enclosure. Now, some cons of owning crested geckos. They are, how do I say that word? Crepuscular? Crepuscular? It means that they are mostly active during twilight hours rather than what nocturnal means, being just generally awake at night. They they like whenever it's really late at night to be really really active. Like yeah, they'll spend my geckos usually wake up at about 6 in the afternoon, but they're not really active at that time. It's just like, oh, it's time for me to wake up, but I'm still a little bit groggy. But that means you will not be able to handle them or see them during the day. Like there are exceptions, like if you need to deep clean the enclosure during the day, where you can quickly take them out, put them in a temporary tub while you're cleaning, uh, and let them sleep while you're doing that. Or if you're just bringing them out for a second, like to show a friend, and then immediately putting them back. But it is not, I don't really recommend handling them during the day, because they are supposed to be asleep at that time, and it is a lot better for them to sleep during the day and then wake up whenever they want to at night. Hi, buddy. Yes, I see. This is the face of a mama's boy. Yeah, yeah. You're distracting me. Oh, I know. I gotta give you your medicine. He he likes to go outside occasionally. He'll stay right by my house, but in in doing that, he got ear mites. So we got some vet prescribed medicine that he has to have in his ears every night, and I haven't given it to him tonight. So I gotta do that. Yes, I do. I got to give you your medicine. All right, getting back to the crested geckos. Um, Another thing is that they do need daily maintenance, kind of like a cat or a dog, but people don't really think about the maintenance when it comes to a cat or dog because they're just so common and they're generally easy to take care of. Um, just because they are seen as like a cuter, more just a more acceptable, I guess, pet. But uh, just like you would with a cat or a dog, you would have to, like, where you'd have to clean their litter box or let them out multiple times a day to go to the bathroom and feed and water them. You would technically have to do the same thing for a crested gecko, where you once a day take their food out, uh, clean the bowl, give them a new bowl. The only reason you should be reusing the same bowl 2 nights in a row is if all your other ones are dirty or they're in another tank. Or if you get disposable bowls, those are good too. Personally, for my smaller baby, I collect like soda bottle uh, lids and I clean them out thoroughly and I just make his food in those and then I throw them away. It's very easy because my nan is a diabetic, so to manage her sugar, she drinks a lot of Pepsi. So I have a plethora of Pepsi bottle caps, which is awesome. Hi, editor me here. Ignore my appearance, but I would like to mention something that I forgot to mention in that clip specifically. If your gecko is a certain weight or age, you do have to change their feeding schedule. Um, Stinky, my older girl, she is 21 grams now. I have her on an every other day feeding schedule. So I will take her food out and I will not put another batch of food in for another 24 hours. And once she gets bigger, I'd say maybe around 30, 35, maybe 40 grams, I will move her to a every 2 day feeding schedule where I will take her bowl out and I will not put another bowl in for another 20, no, not 24, 48 hours. And I know that doesn't seem ethical, but reptiles have a very different metabolism than dogs and cats do, or we do, where we have to eat every single day. Um, their metabolism is a lot slower, and so if they're getting bigger, they can get very overweight very easily um, if they're eating every single day, and that can cause some health problems. Um, but occasionally, you will have to do a deep clean for your crested gecko. Um, and all of this is if your enclosure is not bioactive. Bioactive is where you have springtails and isopods. Isopods are those little roly poly things that you would catch as a kid. We both know what those are. If you don't have those, you will have to do daily like spot cleanings. Like if they pooped on something in their enclosure, just taking a paper towel, wiping it off, and then going about your day. Like you can do that while they're sleeping, just as long as you don't bother them too much. Um, but if your tank is bioactive, you won't have to clean it as much because you already have that cleaning crew in there. But I would still occasionally recommend going in and deep cleaning hides or whatnot. Anything that they like really need cleaned, like the dish, like the actual dish or the holder for a, like the food dishes. Sorry. But stuff like that and like coconut hides or any kind of hide or perch that is artificial and it's not a plant, those do need cleaned. So occasionally you will have to take those out and clean them, even if your enclosure is bioactive. Another con is that crested geckos are very susceptible to respiratory infections. Not as much as chameleons, where they have to have an entirely mesh enclosure, but they do require a good amount of ventilation, usually just an overhead ventilation on a tank specifically made for them, will do just fine, but they cannot have super high humidity levels. So it is very recommended to have a hydrometer slash thermometer. Sorry, I just heard train. It's a train. But I do recommend having a hydrometer slash thermometer. There are some that you can get on Amazon for super cheap and they work amazing. I just don't recommend putting them in the tank with the little sticky thing that they come with because they don't really work. Plus, they trap a lot of humidity in uh, in that little area where the sticky adhesive thing is. It's not actually this big. They're just usually circular, but they're like itty bitty. So I would recommend either just putting a little dollop of silicone right on the back, where the like on top of where the batteries go in. That way, if you need to, you can just take it off, um, or you can hot glue it. Just put a little dollop of hot glue on it, pop it off whenever you need to change the batteries, and then scrape off that old hot glue, put another dollop, and stick it back on the enclosure. As long as the enclosure isn't super duper wet on the glass where you're attaching it at the moment you're attaching it, it'll stick just fine, even with hot glue. You don't need silicone for it. I just used silicone because it was the only thing that I had out at the time, and I didn't have hot glue sticks at the time, so I just used my resources. All right. Another con is that they can be very skittish whenever you first get them, and if they are skittish enough to drop their tails, their tail will not grow back. Though, there's a pro to this one too. They are adorable even with their tails off. They're called frog butts because they look like little frogs and they hop around like little frogs. But but yeah, sometimes they can be very skittish and you have to work with them for weeks, maybe even months. I have been working with Stinky since I got her. I've been handling her since I got her, um, which I did not know I was supposed to do at the time. I I probably should have said this at the beginning of the video, but I am not claiming to be an expert on these animals. I'm just sharing some of my experiences and stuff that I have seen in the crested gecko subreddit that I'm in, and sharing some of my experiences with them that might bother someone who's never owned a reptile before. Now, these guys are my first reptiles. I have two of them, but I have owned exotic pets before that because I was into invertebrates before I got into reptiles. Another con, they they need big tanks as adults. You cannot fit a fully grown crested gecko in like a 12 by 12 by 18, which is what I have my very small baby in at the moment because that is the suitable size of enclosure for him. But he will need upgraded as he grows. Um, I actually just bought an 18 by 18 by 24 inch enclosure for my older girl Stinky for her first birthday. I have not started setting it up at the moment that I am filming this video, but I do have it, and I do have a very big plan for it. I have bought almost everything for it. I just need to get the main materials for it. But it's not like they need wide tanks like say a leopard gecko or a Chinese cave gecko. I think those guys are land dwellers, at least I think. But they don't need big horizontal space. They need a lot of vertical space because they are arboreal, meaning that they like to climb. In the wild out in New Caledonia, where they are originally from, they are tree dwellers. So they love to climb. They love clutter at the top of their enclosure. Rarely will you ever find them at the bottom, but you can clutter the bottom of that up too. But they love to be hidden. So even though you're not going to really see your crested gecko in the enclosure, um, it will help them to feel a lot safer if they have, say, a bunch of plants, a bunch of vines, and a bunch of hides, and different sorts of enrichment. But you have to be very careful with what you give them because those little like reptile hammocks that you see marketed online, they can get their claws stuck in it and actually rip their nail out. So you have to be very careful with that. If you want to make like a vine or a hammock, but I recommend to DIY a like jungle vine or a hammock if you want something like that with, like I said, a very tightly woven paracord. or else your gecko will rip its nails out. There's just a bunch of stuff that can happen to these guys' feet. Uh, and I love their feet. Their feet are so cool and they're super cute. They're just awesome. Though I did mention a lot of cons, I was looking at this from a very beginner point of view, and crested geckos are recommended as a beginner reptile, even though a lot of people don't think that there are beginner reptiles because they are very particular pets. They need a lot of stuff. They need a lot of care, very intensive care that a dog or a cat might not need, like UVB. You can just take your dog or your cat out any time of the year and they can get UVB, but they don't need it as much as a reptile does. If your reptile does not get a certain amount of UVB along with calcium, they could is a very like small ranged word for this because crested geckos, this is debated, but a lot of people say that because they are shade dwellers, they don't necessarily need UVB, but it is still very beneficial for them. And I do recommend actually giving them UVB, even if people say that they don't need it necessarily. But just make sure it is the right kind of UVB, because if you give them the wrong kind, you could possibly fry your gecko. The recommended UVB percentage, which you will see on a bunch of different bulbs and whatnot, or like linear UVBs, is 5 to 7%. And though it is very, very expensive, I recommend the Arcadia linear shade dweller UVB. It is almost $100, but it is the best UVB that you can get for your pet reptile. So if you're willing to spend your own money or buy your kid a thing for the reptile for Christmas or their birthday or some other special event, I do recommend, if you have a crested gecko, to get them a shade dweller 5% UVB from Arcadia. Absolutely awesome. I myself do not own one yet because I am saving up to get two different sizes. Ugh. So that's going to be a lot. But though I did mention a lot of pros and cons, uh, I do I do recommend these guys if you are wanting to start getting like caring for and buying reptiles. Just make sure you have the correct husbandry, you are doing your research months in advance, and you have the enclosure and everything before you actually buy the animal. I have seen I've seen so many cases where people have not bought the right enclosure for their gecko, and their gecko is not in the right thing for their age or their size or necessarily their species, and they don't do the research beforehand. So sometimes these animals go for years living in the wrong kind of enclosure, and it causes them to have so many health issues. Um, but you just have to be very particular in how you set up your enclosure. Naturalistic is always, I mean, always better. You can give them like fancy perches or anything like that, but keeping it naturalistic and cluttered with plants and vines and, just like I said, all sorts of things for them to climb on is the best thing that you could possibly do. Like, I have a bridge, I have sticks, I have a homemade vine in my older girl Stinky's enclosure. She loves them, though she is still a little bit skittish. She's just not really she's she's not a social animal. So I'll I'll hold her whenever I can or take her out for health checks. Another important thing, health checks. You want to do at least a health check once a month where you weigh and check out your gecko's toes. Not weigh their toes, but like weigh them themselves. Weigh them in grams. It is the most accurate thing to weigh a reptile in. But those are all of my pros and cons. And like I said, despite all of the cons that I mentioned, I was I was making this video from a beginner's or parent's point of view. So all of those cons I personally don't mind, but I know someone else probably would mind. Like having to feed them bugs. You don't, like I said, you don't have to feed them bugs, but I personally recommend it, especially crickets, because it gives them a form of enrichment being able to hunt. But with all that said, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you will consider liking the video and maybe subscribing. But that is all for today, and now we're gonna say bye, aren't we? I know you were just so comfy, and I messed all that up. Okay, say bye. Bye.